Hey everyone, this is Tio. In today's video, I'm going to talk about how you can get started with sketching using pen, ink, and watercolor. Now on my YouTube channel, I have a lot of tutorials on urban sketching with pen, ink, and watercolor, but there isn't a video specifically for beginners on how you can get started, what are the basic knowledge that you need to know. So in today's video, I'm going to cover all of that. Now this video is going to talk about the basic tools that you need, and then in the second part of the video I'm going to do some very simple drawing demonstration using the materials that you see here. So let's talk about the tools. So with pen, ink, and watercolor, obviously we need pens, we need ink, watercolor. We also need brushes because we need to paint with the watercolor, and of course paper. So let's start with pens first. There is a huge variety of pens to choose from. For example, fountain pens, roller ballpoint pens, needlepoint, technical pens, those disposable pens. There's just too many to choose. The most important attribute of the pen that you want is it must have waterproof ink because you want to work with watercolor. And just by looking at the pens, for example, sometimes it can be difficult to tell whether or not it has waterproof ink inside. For example, this Uniball Vision needlepoint pen, it has waterproof and fade-proof ink inside. But for this Pilot high-tech point, it has no mention of the waterproof qualities. It just says that it has pure liquid ink inside. And this particular pen, the ink is not waterproof. Technical pens, such as those with needlepoint tips, those that are used for drawing manga, for example, the Copic multiliner or this Zig Cartoonist mangaka pen, well, they usually have waterproof inks, but you cannot be too sure. So if you are not sure, always do some research online. So for example, with this particular pen, it says that it has water-based pigment. Now, when I see these two words, water-based, I will associate it with non-waterproof inks. But here it says that it's pigmented, so that means this pen, the ink is waterproof. But again, before you use any pens, do test it out before you use it to create any drawing, because you don't want any surprises. Majority of ballpoint pens, they do not use waterproof ink, so be very careful when you are getting such pens. This particular pen that I have, this is from the Uniball Signal series of pens, and they feature waterproof ink. If you take a look at this pen, it has no labels. The only words are on the pen cap, and that's the name of the pen. So it's impossible to tell whether or not this pen has waterproof ink. So you do need to do some research online to find out the type of ink that is in the pen. On my blog, I have many reviews for pen and paper, ink and watercolor, so that can be a good place for you to start your research. So another type of pen would be fountain pens. Now, with fountain pens, you can choose the ink that you use inside. The type of ink to use in fountain pens when you want to use with watercolor is obviously waterproof ink. So for example, this is a waterproof ink. There isn't any labels that mention that this is waterproof ink, so again, you have to find the information online. Now be very careful when you are using waterproof ink in fountain pens. Some waterproof inks, they are not suitable for use in fountain pens. So when you want to buy waterproof inks, make sure that they specifically mention it is safe for use in fountain pens. With a fountain pen and a bottle of ink, this too can last you for a very long time before you need to get a new bottle, maybe a few years even. If you draw regularly, maybe about a year, but compared to buying disposable pens like this combination will definitely save you more money. And fountain pens doesn't have to be very expensive. You can get a good one for less than US $20. There are many good brands that make affordable fountain pens. For example, Platinum, Pilot. I have a whole list of them on my blog. You can check out the link in the video description below. And now let's talk about watercolor. The main characteristic of watercolor is transparency. There are, of course, non-transparent watercolor, but if you want to choose your own colors, always look for transparent colors because these are the colors that will work well with pen and ink sketches. Because when you paint over the pen and ink lines, you still want the lines to show through. Now you can get watercolors in tubes like this, or you can get them in pens like this. You can buy them in sets, or you can buy them individually. For tubes, they are usually sold in 15 ml capacity or the smaller 5 ml capacity. Now if you get individual tubes like this, you have to do some research on which colors to get because not all colors work well with mixing with specific colors. If you get a set like this or like this, the colors are already chosen for you, so there is a good number of colors to choose from when it comes to mixing. For beginners, I would actually recommend you get watercolor sets like this because the alternative is to buy individual tubes and you have to do a lot of research. There is a lot of information online. It can be overwhelming and it's very difficult for a beginner to interpret those information. So it's best to start out with a set, work with the colors that you already have, learn more about colors and color mixing, and then move on to choosing your own colors and exploring other colors. Watercolor comes in different quality. There is the student grade quality and artist grade quality. So for example, here on the left side, I have a Winsor & Newton Cotman box set. The Cotman series of watercolor from Winsor & Newton, they are student grade colors. And here with Holbein artist watercolor, this is considered artist grade. With Daniel Smith paints, these are considered artist grade as well. The main difference between student and artist grade is with student grade paints, it's sometimes a bit difficult to achieve the same level of intensity, the vibrancy that you can get with artist grade paints. Student and artist grade paints can come in either pens like this or tubes like this. Now with artist grade paints, they usually have more pigment compared to the binder and filler. With student grade paints, there is usually more fillers and binders. So if you want to get very intense colors, very vibrant colors, you just need to use a little bit of the artist grade paints and you can get those vibrant colors. But with student grade, usually you need to use a lot of the paint and you can use up the colors quite fast. For tubes like this, you will need a separate palette so that you can have a working area to mix colors on. For box sets like this, they usually have the palette built into the box so you can mix on this, and if you want to go outdoors to paint and sketch, this is more convenient compared to bringing this and the tubes out. So which brands would I recommend to beginners? Well, there are actually a lot of good quality brands that are affordable. Too many for me to actually list in this video because I want to keep this video short. So do check out my blog post on beginner watercolor recommendations. Once you have watercolor, you will need some way to apply the watercolor on your paper. That's where the brushes come in. There are different types of brushes, like the different types of hair. There is natural hair and synthetic hair. I do recommend you get natural hair brushes because they can hold more water so you don't have to constantly reload the paint as much. Here I have a very typical wooden handle watercolor brush. This particular brush is the silver black velvet. The hair here is a mixture of squirrel and synthetic hair. This is another wooden handle brush. The brand is Escoda. This particular brush is called the Perla and it features synthetic hair. Brushes come in different sizes and both these brushes are size 8, but the volume of hair it's a bit different and you can see that the shape of the hair it's a bit different. With the synthetic hair it's more pointed, but with the natural hair and synthetic mix it's a bit more rounded. So this brush here, this can hold a lot more water compared to this synthetic hair brush. If you're painting on paper size that is around A4 or A5, I would suggest you get a size 6 or a size 8. And if you want to paint details, you can get a much smaller brush. And besides wooden handle brushes, you also have collapsible brushes. These are pocket brushes, so you can cap this brush like this and put it in your pocket or inside a box like this. And you have water brushes as well. This is one example. This is a rather small water brush. So with water brushes, you can feel the water in the body here. And then you can squeeze and have the water come out from the tip. So brushes like this, these are water brushes, they usually use synthetic hair. And this hair, they can wear out quite fast. Obviously, this larger brush here can hold more water. I do recommend you get a water brush that can hold a lot of water so that you don't have to refill it as much. This brand is the Holbein brand. Other good brands would be the Pentel and Kuretake water brushes. Between wooden handle brushes versus the portable water brush, I would recommend you get brushes like this or like this, because with water brushes you have to control the water flow, and for beginners I believe you can learn more about watercolor techniques when you are using normal watercolor brushes. If you are using normal brushes like this, you will also need water to wash the brushes. So you can use water in cups like this. Any cup will do. Usually there is going to be 2 cups of water, one to wash away the paint and the other is for you to have access to clean water. Sometimes when I'm sketching outdoors, I like to bring around empty ink bottles like this. If you want to reuse ink bottles, make sure to get ones that have a large opening, because when you are painting, when you want to clean your brush, having a large opening makes it easier. If your opening is too small, sometimes you may hit the corner and it may damage the brush. So look for containers or bottles or cups with large openings. For watercolor brushes, I actually recommend you get those collapsible pocketable brushes like this, because they are almost the same length compared to wooden brushes and they are as comfortable to use compared to wooden brushes. The main advantage wooden brushes have is they are available in different shapes compared to those collapsible ones, which are usually available with round tip brushes. The last thing you need is paper, and depending on the type of paper that you use, it can get expensive. For watercolor purposes, you will need to use watercolor paper because watercolor paper is treated to handle water compared to other types of drawing paper. So with other types of paper, when you use water on those paper, the water will soak through the paper and it becomes impossible to paint, or the paper will become so soft that you can tear the paper very easily. So you do have to get watercolor paper. And there are different types of watercolor paper: the smooth hot press, the textured cold press, and the rough paper. Usually for beginners, cold press, the textured cold press paper is the general paper, is the best paper for general purpose use. For beginners, the textured cold press paper is good enough for most purposes. The price of the paper will depend on the quality of the paper, and usually there are 2 types of paper: cotton paper versus non-cotton paper. So here with me is the Archer's 100% cotton paper. This is very high quality paper. This is very expensive. You can achieve all sorts of watercolor techniques on this. More specifically, wet on wet techniques on such high quality paper is easier to achieve compared to non-cotton paper. So if you want to get those soft color blendings, if you want to blend the colors into the white of the paper, it is much easier to work with on cotton paper. But for beginners, you can usually start out with non-cotton content paper. Even for non-cotton paper, there are different qualities as well. Some can handle watercolor well, some not as well, as in when you paint on the paper, the colors do not appear as vibrant, or the colors, the water, they do not flow as well. Again, I have many recommendations for papers on my website. You can check out all the reviews for the different types of paper. This Canson watercolor paper, it's alright, it's average watercolor paper. If you have access to Daler Rowney alcohol fine paper, this is pretty good for beginners because the paper is very white and it's great for watercolor mixing. The colors, they appear very vibrant on this paper, but compared to cotton paper, the colors, they do not flow as softly like this. But for beginners, I think for pen and ink sketching, quick washes, this is suitable enough. You can also get papers in sketchbooks like this, and sketchbooks like this, they usually do not have 100% cotton paper, so you are going to get those cellulose paper. It's good for quick sketching, pen and ink watercolor, but not as good for like real watercolor painting with lots of wet on wet or used with lots of water, because the paper in such sketchbooks, they are usually thinner. This sketchbook is the Global Art Materials Watercolor Journal, 200 GSM paper. The weight of this paper is 300 GSM, so this paper here, it's thicker. This is not as thick. So if you use a lot of water, the paper may buckle. But for a sketchbook like this, when the paper is dry, you can close it up, clip it to keep the pages flat. But when you are painting, when you're using a lot of water, the paper buckles and it can be quite challenging to paint, because certain areas of the paper will be wet and the water will flow to the lower regions, will collect into a pool in certain areas. So a bit more challenging, but definitely still suitable for use for beginners. This is Global Art Materials. This is a Stillman and Byrne sketchbook, Delta series sketchbook. You can handle watercolor as well, even though this paper is not watercolor paper specifically, you can still handle watercolor. This is a Moleskine watercolor sketchbook, so you can handle watercolor as well, and good for pen and ink too. I personally prefer the Global Art Materials sketchbook, because I like the cloth cover. And now let's do some very simple pen ink watercolor sketching. For this quick demo, I will be using the Daler Rowney Aquafine watercolor paper. This is cold press 300 GSM paper. This is the jumbo pad with 50 sheets, very affordable. If you are looking for a similar quality paper, you can check out the Fabriano Studio paper, which is also available in 50 sheets pad like this. Okay, for this demo, I will be drawing my watercolor palette. I'll be using this brush, a size 8 brush, and I will be sketching using this Uniball Signal Gel Stick rollerball point pen. This is going to be a very quick and loose sketch of my watercolor box. It's just to show off the waterproof qualities of the ink and how watercolor handles on the paper with the ink and the transparent characteristics of the watercolor paper. This particular box is the Winsor & Newton Deluxe Sketcher box. By the way, if you want to get box sets, do not get too many colors, because too many colors for beginners can be overwhelming. So just get the typical 12 half pan boxes. Those 12 colors would be sufficient enough. And you can learn more about watercolor mixing with limited colors, more than you can with too many colors. Alright, so this is the box very fast. Maybe I should draw the pens as well, the side of the pens, so that there is the 3D quality to it. Depending on the pen you use, well, you're going to get different types of lines, but usually you're going to get uniform lines like this. With rollerball point pens, the characteristic is the ink blobs, which I find it kind of fun. One thing to take note when sketching with pen and ink is be careful not to run your finger over the lines when they are still wet. So here I accidentally had my finger over the lines, and here are some ink smudges that were created accidentally. Let's paint this now. Remember the 2 cups of water, these are essential. I'm going to use this mister to wet the colors so that I can pick up the paint more easily. Usually if I do not bring this around, I would actually dab my watercolor brush into water and then put droplets of water onto the paint. Notice some of the ink smudges that were created when I sprayed the watercolor. So the ink has not dried yet. You do need to take note of the drying time of the ink that you use. So for ink that are slow drying, you have to wait a bit longer or put the drawing under the sun for a few minutes to make sure that it's totally dry before you apply watercolor. If not, the ink is going to mix with the watercolor and it's not going to be nice. So hopefully the ink has dried, so let's start by painting the color swatches. So after I have laid down the color, I'm going to wash my brush to make sure that it's clean and before I pick up another color. Notice the transparent quality of the watercolor. Creating color swatches like this can be quite fun and lets you test out all the colors that you have to find out which colors are transparent and how they react, how they look. So now I have red paint on my brush. Before I pick up a new color, I will wash it in the cup, the first cup. So the water here is dirty, and now I wash it again in this cup where the water is clean. So now the brush is clean, I can pick up the next color. Depending on the style, you can color within the lines or you can color over the lines. If you color over the lines, you can see the transparency of the watercolor medium. Right until this stage, I have been using the colors straight from the pen without any mixing. So now I'm going to mix some colors to color the shadow areas of the watercolor box. Mixing watercolor is a whole other ball game, and there are many color theories you can learn, different styles. Different artists would have different colors that they choose. They will have different looks. So now I'm using French ultramarine and burnt sienna to mix the shadow tones. So I can see the light source is coming from this direction. So I'm going to paint the shadows here. Now when the wash is still wet, I can add in burnt sienna to get the colors to shift from blue to brown. So I can press down a bit harder to get those thicker strokes. So see this wash here, this is brown. I'm going to charge in this wash with burnt sienna. So this is the shadow side of the box. Here as well. This little clip here is in shadow too, so I want to draw this and it's casting shadow onto this side. This sketch is almost done. Now I want to add some special effects. I want to add some splatter. So I'm going to take some red paint here. Just load up my brush with some red paint, and then I'm going to tap against my finger to create those splatter spots. Not too much. I still have some paint on my brush. Maybe let me just put some paint here as if I have paint on the palette. So now I'm going to pick up another color. I'm going to pick up yellow. I'm choosing yellow because yellow is sort of like the complementary color of blue. There is a lot of blue here, so I want to pick up yellow to sort of balance out the sketch. So once again, I'm going to pick up the paint. So I'm going to use Hansa Yellow Medium. And once again, I'm going to just tap against my finger to create those splatter. While I still have some paint on my brush, I'm going to paint here as well. Maybe mix here, let the colors mix together to form orange. Be careful when you're creating the splatter marks because the splatter would fly out further than you expect. So I have a lot of splatter marks on my table now. So let's take a quick look at this sketch, which is not dry yet. So when the paint is not dry and you add colors, you can get color blends like this. So for example, this blue, this is phthalo blue. This is not dry yet. When I created the splatter, some of the yellow went into the blue and you can see some green in it and the color sort of diffuse. This is French ultramarine with Daniel Smith's burnt sienna. You can see some granulation here. So different types of colors will have different characteristics. For French ultramarine and burnt sienna, they are granulating paints, so you can see textures like this. But for phthalo blue, for example, this is a pretty flat color without any texture. This color as well, Hansa yellow medium, you don't see any textures in this. So this is a very quick and loose sketch. The goal of sketching, well, at least to me, it's really to have fun, really to enjoy the creative process. Don't worry too much, play with the paints that you have, play with the pens, just create different sort of lines, practice, improve, learn from others. All right, so this is waterproof ink. Let me show you what happens when you paint over non-waterproof ink. Now the ink inside this Pilot V5 high-tech point is water-soluble ink. Let me just write on a scrap piece of paper. So this is the Pilot pen. I'm going to dry the lines properly before I apply water over it. I have dried the lines with some hot air, so let's try painting over it. Notice how the ink has started to dissolve in the water. It's starting to affect the color. Oh, this color. This is Pyro Red, if I remember it correctly. This color is not very transparent, so not a very suitable color when it comes to pen and ink sketching. Notice how the ultramarine rushed into the rose color or magenta color. Let's compare the ink from the Pilot pen with the ink from the Uniball Signal gel stick. So with the Pilot pen, you can see the lines, there is feathering, it looks ugly here as well and here as well. I'm actually quite surprised that the ink did not dissolve totally, but this is not nice. Compared to this, the lines here with the Uniball Signal gel stick, the lines are very sharp, totally water resistant, waterproof. When you paint over the waterproof ink, the colors will be very clean because the ink doesn't run out to interfere with the paint like this. If I had used the Pilot pen to draw this sketch, the ink will be feathering everywhere and it's going to look really ugly. So the pen that you use, the ink that you use matters a lot. So that's it for this introduction to drawing with pen, ink, and watercolor. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. If you want to check out other tutorials that I have a YouTube playlist that's filled with tutorials. The link is in the video description below. And if you want to check out the reviews for all the art supplies that I have featured on my channel as well as on my website, links are in the video description below as well. Thank you for watching. I hope this video has been helpful. See you in the next one. Bye!